Thank you, Mr. President. I'm down here on the floor this afternoon, with my colleague, Senator Kaine from Virginia, and the ranking member of the Finance Committee, Senator Wyden, to talk about the spending and tax bill that is coming before the Congress, driven by Republicans and the Trump administration. Whether it's one bill or two bills, it doesn't really matter. It is the centerpiece of Donald Trump's economic agenda. And it's really important to talk about the impacts that this spending and tax package will have on the American public. Well, there will be some new spending for defense and some new spending on immigration policy. The heart of this spending and tax package will be familiar to many Americans because they remember it from 2017 during the first Trump administration. The heart of this Republican economic proposal is a massive tax cut for the very, very wealthy and for corporations. And this time, not borrowed to be paid back later by middle-class taxpayers, this time paid for by immediate cuts to some of the programs that regular, ordinary Americans, many frail seniors, depend on, like the Medicaid program. Just for a little bit of context, it does appear to a lot of Americans that this whole thing feels a bit like a scam.
In the grand halls of the U.S. Senate, speeches often come and go, echoing into the record books but leaving little impact on the public imagination. Yet every so often, a senator takes the floor and delivers remarks that cut straight to the heart of America's economic anxieties. Senator Chris Murphy's critique of former President Donald Trump's new tax and spending proposal is one such speech, blistering, relentless, and crafted to expose what he repeatedly calls a scam. At its core, Murphy's argument is simple but explosive. The Trump administration's economic centerpiece is not designed for the American worker, the struggling family, or the retiree trying to make ends meet. Instead, it is a carefully engineered transfer of wealth from the middle class and the poor straight into the pockets of billionaires and multinational corporations. From Elon Musk's expanding empire to Trump's own questionable financial entanglements, Murphy paints a portrait of a government increasingly run by billionaires for billionaires. But the real story here is not just about the numbers on tax charts or the details of Medicaid cuts. It is about the future of American democracy, whether government policy serves the broad public good or simply becomes an ATM for the ultra-wealthy. And that is the debate that deserves more than a passing glance.
Mr. President.
I recognize the senator from Connecticut.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm down here on the floor this afternoon, with my colleague, Senator Kaine from Virginia, and the ranking member of the Finance Committee, Senator Wyden, to talk about the spending and tax bill that is coming before the Congress, driven by Republicans and the Trump administration. Whether it's one bill or two bills, it doesn't really matter. It is the centerpiece of Donald Trump's economic agenda. And it's really important to talk about the impacts that this spending and tax package will have on the American public. Well, there will be some new spending for defense and some new spending on immigration policy. The heart of this spending and tax package will be familiar to many Americans because they remember it from 2017 during the first Trump administration. The heart of this Republican economic proposal is a massive tax cut for the very, very wealthy and for corporations. And this time, not borrowed to be paid back later by middle-class taxpayers, this time paid for by immediate cuts to some of the programs that regular, ordinary Americans, many frail seniors, depend on, like the Medicaid program. Just for a little bit of context, it does appear to a lot of Americans that this whole thing feels a bit like a scam. That this is a government that is being handed over to the billionaire class, in order to operationalize government to make money for the very, very wealthy, and for the rest of us to pay the price. The cost of gas is going up, the cost of groceries continues to go up. And meanwhile, Donald Trump and his billionaire crowd are doing better than ever. Just a couple examples. Since Elon Musk, the richest man in the universe, has taken control of the government with Donald Trump, the value of his business has gone up by 30%. Tesla stock has gone up by 30%. Of course it has. Of course it has. Because Elon Musk is now able to get inside the government to arrange things to benefit his companies. For instance, the NLRB is gone. They fired the Democrat on the board. It is unable to muster a quorum. It's not coincidental that the NLRB had several open investigations of Tesla. Our foreign policy has been monetized to support people like Elon Musk. News just broke yesterday that Vietnam is really worried about Trump's tariff policy, and so the way that they're going to try to get some help from the Trump administration is to give some help to Elon Musk's businesses, that they're going to get Elon Musk a Starlink contract. And they believe that by doing that, they'll be able to get some help from the Trump administration on tariffs. So Elon Musk and the billionaires are able to operationalize and monetize our foreign policy. And of course, Elon Musk has access to the data, especially the data inside Treasury, that's going to help him gain an advantage on his competitors, whether he's trying to set up a new tax payment system or he's trying to set up a new universal payment capacity on Twitter. So it's not shocking that the value of Musk's business has gone way up, because he now controls the federal government in a way that can benefit his business. But Trump is doing very well too. Made $100 million off of a meme coin where we have no idea as Americans who's buying it. It is very likely foreign actors trying to influence the administration who can secretly buy the meme coin and then whisper to Donald Trump that we got your back when you needed it. $40 million from Amazon for a new documentary of the First Lady. Legal settlements from ABC News, Meta, and X, all shockingly settled with cash payments to the Trump family after the election. And the monetization of foreign policy for Donald Trump, just like the monetization of foreign policy for Elon Musk. News this week that the PGA and the Saudis were meeting with the president to try to settle their disputes. Not coincidental to the fact that Donald Trump is in business with one of those golf leagues. So it just appears to many Americans like this administration puts the billionaires, the corporations, those that are loyal and friendly to Donald Trump first, and all the rest of us second. The apex of this effort to turn our government and government policy over to the billionaires is this tax cut. Again, this tax and spending package has a lot of elements to it, but the centerpiece is a tax cut that is 852 times bigger for the top 1% of earners in this country than for low-income families. That's a number that's a little hard to get your head wrapped around, so I just wanted to put it on this chart. That's what 852 times looks like. The rates go down for folks that make more than $600,000 a year, but they don't move for folks that make under $600,000 a year. I mean, they're not trying to hide what's going on here. Rates are coming down. If you make a whole ton of money, rates are staying the same if you're middle income or lower income. Another way to tell this story is that if you're in the top 1%, your average tax cut is about $70,000. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of money. But if you're making $30,000 a year, and there's a whole bunch of people in this country that are making $30,000 a year, especially when Republicans refuse to support the minimum wage going above $7.25 an hour. If you make $30,000 a year, you're going to get about $130. $70,000, if you're doing really, really well, $130 for everybody else. That doesn't make any sense. Why do people making $600,000 a year need $70,000? Well, only $100 goes to everybody else. The corporations are in the mix here too. They came to Congress in 2007 and said we'd need a lower tax rate. And then Trump and his Republican allies gave them a tax rate even lower than they asked. And they made this claim that all this extra money going to the corporations was going to be passed down to workers. They had a specific claim that it was going to result in $4,000 more in income to every American. Because that's how trickle-down economics works in the brains of Republicans. You give a whole bunch of money to corporations and they're going to be generous and they're going to give that money to workers in extra income. Well, we now have 8 years of experience since that first tax cut that they're looking to reauthorize. We know what happened. The studies show that it wasn't $4,000 of extra income, it wasn't $3,000, it wasn't $2,000, it wasn't $1,000, it wasn't $500, it wasn't $400, it wasn't even $200, it was zero. The tax cut resulted in an increase in salary to those people that worked for those corporations that got the big tax cut. A salary increase is zero. It's a scam. Trickle-down economics is a scam. When you put this much money into the hands of the wealthy, it does not trickle down to everybody else. When you give corporations those enormous tax cuts, it does not trickle down to everybody else. It stays in the pockets of the wealthy. The corporations use it in order to do stock buybacks, in order to inflate CEO salaries. It just separates the rich from the poor. It is a scam. It is a scam. Now, the last thing I'll say before turning it over to Senator Kaine is that this version of the giant billionaire and corporate tax cut is so much worse than the first version. It's still a tax cut for the wealthy that's 852 times bigger than for folks at the bottom of the income scale. But whereas in 2017 it was all borrowed, and that's bad, because that money has to be recouped somehow. That means that everybody eventually is going to either pay higher interest rates or have their taxes raised or their services cut to service all that debt, trillions of dollars worth of debt. This time Republicans are contemplating not borrowing the money, but instead just taking it from poor people and middle class people. Just taking it from them to give it to the billionaires and the corporations. The cut that they're contemplating in the House of Representatives is a cut to Medicaid. Now, they're also thinking about cuts to Medicare, your parents' primary health insurance. They're contemplating cuts to the Affordable Care Act. That's the program that insures 20 million working Americans, but they're really zeroed in on Medicaid. And they're contemplating such devastating cuts to Medicaid that it would eviscerate the program. And I mean, maybe you can say, well, I mean, Medicaid, it's for, poor people, and that's not me. Well, listen, I think that we have an obligation to try to make sure that everybody in this country, even poor children, have access to health care. But Medicaid also pays for your parents' or your neighbors' nursing home costs. If you cut the amount of money that they're talking about out of the Medicaid program, you're literally talking about nursing homes shutting down and seniors being out on the street. That's not hyperbole. That's what happens if you make these massive cuts to Medicaid. And so what they're talking about this year is not just running up a credit card bill in order to fund the tax cuts for the wealthy. They're literally talking about putting seniors out on the street in order to fund a tax cut for the wealthy. The whole thing just feels like a scam to people. The favors being given to billionaires that are inside the government, the tax cut that benefits the very, very wealthy at the expense of everybody else, the cutting of services that help regular people in order to finance the tax cut. And whether it ends up being one bill or two bills, the centerpiece is still the centerpiece. The transfer of resources and wealth from regular people, from the middle class, from poor people, to the very, very wealthy, the millionaire and billionaire class, the corporations. And so we're going to tell this story here on the Senate floor, all over the country, while this bill moves its way through the process, either as one bill or two bills. Because regardless of the process, The story is still the same, a scam. To take money from regular people to make the lives of the rich and powerful even more lavish. I yield the floor.
The defining struggle of American democracy has always been who truly holds the levers of power, the many or the few. From the earliest days of the Republic, when property-owning elites shaped the Constitution to guard their wealth, to the industrial Gilded Age when robber barons dictated government policy, the same tension has resurfaced again and again. Senator Chris Murphy's speech on the Senate floor is not just another partisan critique. It is part of that longer American story, where ordinary people confront a political system increasingly aligned with concentrated wealth. His framing of Trump's new tax and spending proposal as a scam invites us to dig deeper into both the mechanics and the morality of modern American capitalism. At the heart of Murphy's critique is the simple but devastating math of inequality. In Trump's proposal, the average millionaire would walk away with a tax break worth around $70,000 annually. Meanwhile, someone earning $30,000 a year, roughly the income of a retail worker, a home health aide, or a struggling single parent, would see a mere $130 in tax relief. Put differently, the rich receive tax cuts 852 times larger than those at the bottom. Numbers like these are not mere abstractions. They tell a story of priorities, about whose lives are deemed worthy of relief and whose lives are considered expendable. This inequality is not accidental. It is a deliberate design baked into decades of conservative economic ideology, often referred to as trickle-down economics. The theory suggests that if government lightens the tax burden on corporations and wealthy individuals, prosperity will flow downward to workers in the form of higher wages, better jobs, and economic growth. But as Murphy pointed out, the historical record of the last 8 years since Trump's first round of tax cuts tells a very different story. Corporations pocketed the savings, bought back their own stock to boost shareholder value, and rewarded CEOs with astronomical bonuses. Workers, despite being promised a $4,000 boost in annual income, saw zero real increase. Murphy's words resonate because they expose this as not just a flawed theory, but a scam, a cycle in which the wealthy lobby for cuts, reap the benefits, and then fund political campaigns to keep the system in place. The losers in this equation are not abstract categories. They are the millions of Americans who depend on Medicaid for health care, seniors who rely on nursing home support, and working families who stretch every paycheck to cover groceries, gas, and rent. One of the most striking elements of Murphy's speech is his use of vivid examples of billionaire influence. Elon Musk, he argues, has been able to leverage his proximity to power in order to pad his already astronomical wealth. From securing Starlink contracts through foreign policy maneuvering to benefiting from a neutered National Labor Relations Board, Musk exemplifies how government can be restructured to serve the private ambitions of the ultra-rich. This is not merely about ideology. It is about the capture of state machinery for personal enrichment. Murphy also highlights Trump's own ventures, such as profiting off a meme coin or receiving lucrative deals with major corporations for media projects. These examples reinforce his broader claim that the Trump administration blurs the line between public service and personal business. To ordinary Americans, this looks less like governance and more like an elaborate pyramid scheme where loyalty to the president and wealth determine access to favorable policies. The danger here is twofold. First, there is the immediate human cost of gutting programs like Medicaid. As Murphy warns, such cuts would not only leave millions without medical coverage, but could literally shut down nursing homes, putting frail seniors at risk of homelessness. This is not a distant hypothetical. It is a direct consequence of stripping billions from healthcare to finance giveaways for the rich. Second, there is the long-term erosion of democratic legitimacy. When citizens come to believe that government is simply a tool of billionaires, faith in the system collapses. And when faith collapses, space opens for authoritarianism, populist rage, and political instability. Critics may argue that Murphy's speech is just another partisan attack on Trump and Republicans. But to dismiss it in those terms would be to ignore the larger structural critique embedded in his words. This is not simply about one man or one administration. It is about the trajectory of American capitalism in the 21st century. In an era where billionaires like Musk, Bezos, and Zuckerberg wield more wealth than entire nations, the question of whether democracy can constrain economic oligarchy is perhaps the defining challenge of our time.
To understand the stakes, one must revisit the history of inequality in America. In the post-World War II decades, the nation saw unprecedented growth in middle-class wealth. Strong unions, progressive taxation, and robust social programs created what was often referred to as the American dream. But beginning in the 1980s with Reaganomics, tax policy shifted decisively in favor of the rich. Corporate tax rates plummeted, top marginal income taxes were slashed, and the deregulation of finance unleashed a speculative frenzy. Over the next 4 decades, wages for ordinary workers stagnated while the top 1% captured a staggering share of new wealth. Trump's economic policies, far from being revolutionary, are simply the latest chapter in this story. They accelerate the redistribution of resources upward while dismantling the very programs designed to cushion inequality. The proposed Medicaid cuts are particularly telling. Medicaid is not just a poor person's program, as Murphy noted. It is the backbone of elderly care in America, paying for nursing homes and long-term care that Medicare does not cover. Slashing Medicaid is not just a blow to the vulnerable poor, it is an assault on the very fabric of middle-class security. The rhetorical power of Murphy's speech lies in his ability to frame these policy debates in moral terms. It is not just about economics, it is about justice. Why, he asks, should someone earning $600,000 a year, already among the wealthiest in the nation, receive a $70,000 tax cut, while someone scraping by on $30,000 gets a token $130? The question is less about the numbers and more about the values they represent. A government that consistently favors the rich at the expense of the poor is not a government for the people, it is a government for profit. Murphy's insistence that this proposal feels like a scam captures the growing sense among Americans that the game is rigged. When corporations pay lobbyists millions to secure tax loopholes, when billionaires fund campaigns to shape favorable legislation, and when political leaders personally profit from their positions, ordinary citizens cannot help but feel alienated. And alienation breeds cynicism, disengagement, and anger, all of which weaken democracy. What makes this debate especially urgent is the timing. America is still grappling with the aftershocks of inflation, the rising cost of living, and the lingering effects of global economic disruptions. For working families, every dollar matters. To propose stripping Medicaid, freezing wages, and handing massive breaks to billionaires in such a climate is not only economically reckless, but morally indefensible. And yet, Trump and his allies are betting that voters will either not notice or will be distracted by culture wars and political spectacle. That is why voices like Murphy's matter. By cutting through the noise and laying out the raw mechanics of inequality, he forces the public to confront the uncomfortable truth. The government is being turned into a machine to enrich the already wealthy. And unless challenged, this machine will grind down the middle class until little remains. As the debate unfolds, one cannot help but wonder, what is the endgame of such policies? A society where billionaires live in fortified compounds while millions struggle without health care? A political system where only the wealthy can buy influence? Or a democracy hollowed out into a facade while oligarchs rule behind the scenes? These are not dystopian fantasies, they are the logical outcomes of policies that prioritize the few at the expense of the many. Murphy's call to action is not merely for his Senate colleagues, but for the American people. Democracy only functions when citizens demand accountability, when they refuse to accept that poverty for many and wealth for a few is the natural order of things. By labeling the proposal a scam, he is urging Americans to see through the smoke and mirrors of tax jargon and budget negotiations. At its core, this is about power. Who has it, who benefits from it, and who was left behind.
If history teaches anything, it is that unchecked inequality eventually destabilizes societies. Rome fell, in part, because elites hoarded wealth while the masses were impoverished. The French Revolution exploded when aristocrats clung to privilege while peasants starved. America is not immune. The growing chasm between rich and poor, coupled with the erosion of social safety nets, risks pushing the nation toward its own breaking point. In this light, Murphy's speech is more than partisan theater. It is a warning. A warning that if we continue down this path, the promise of democracy itself is at risk. The challenge for Americans is to decide whether they will accept a system rigged in favor of billionaires or demand a government that serves the common good. Senator Murphy's words echo with urgency because they are not about abstract numbers or partisan talking points. They are about people. They are about the retiree who could lose nursing home care, the single mother stretching every dollar, the worker whose wages never rise even as corporate profits soar. To call this proposal a scam is not exaggeration. It is recognition of a system deliberately tilted to favor the few over the many. The fight over Trump's tax and spending package is more than a policy battle. It is a struggle for the soul of American democracy. Will government continue to serve billionaires like Musk and Trump, or will it reclaim its duty to the people it represents? That is the question Murphy leaves us with, and it is a question every American must answer.